All right, kids, we're going to talk about trigonometry, and this will help us get ready for calculus. Just some basics about trigonometry. There's 6 trigonometric functions. We have sine x. We have cosine x. We have tangent. And by the way, tangent is the same as, let me change my marker here. Tangent is the same as sine x over cosine x. That's going to reappear in calculus quite a few times, dealing with tangent. We have cosecant, which is 1 over sine x. We have secant, which is 1 over cos x. And we have cotangent, which is 1 over tangent x. And I'll move my face in just a second, because if it's 1 over tangent x, then that means it's the same as cosine x over sine x. So these are the 6 trig functions that we're going to deal with a lot. We're going to primarily deal with just sine and cosine and memorize stuff based off of that. And we're going to reshape things using these identities. Okay? 6 trig functions: sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, cotangent. Be careful with these guys, because you're going to want to say that secant is 1 over sine, but it's kind of backwardsy as far as the first letter of the alphabet goes. This is what the graphs look like. Sine, cosine, and tangent are periodic functions. They repeat every 2 pi. Okay, so sine starts at 0, 0, goes up and it hits 1, goes back down, hits -1, and repeats itself at 2 pi. We're going to use radians in calculus. Now down here you see that the degrees are also there, but we're always going to use radians when we deal with things. So if you're using a graphing calculator, make sure that your mode is set to radians. That's what sine looks like. Cosine is very different, just shifted over a tiny bit, and instead of starting at 0, 0, it starts at 0, 1. And so it starts right here at 0, 1, it goes down to -1 at pi, and it starts repeating itself at 2 pi. That is the cosine function. Now the tangent function looks very different. The tangent function, you're going to see a lot of explosions. Now why? Why do you see these dashed lines? These dashed lines are called vertical asymptotes, and vertical asymptotes exist when you have an undefined part of your graph, or also known as a point of discontinuity. Okay. Remember, tangent is sine over cosine. We might remember from the previous that if I were to plug in pi over 2, I would get 0. So where do these explosions happen? Where do these horizontal asymptotes happen? At the pi over 2, or 1.5 over 2. Stuff that like pi over 2-ish. Those explosions happen because that is what makes cosine 0. That's what makes the denominator 0. So those explosions happen every pi, starting at pi over 2. So it happens at -pi over 2, and 1.5, or 3 pi's over 2, or 5 pi's over 2, so on and so forth. So those are the graphs of the 3. We're not going to look at the graphs of the other 3. They're just not going to affect us that much, not in Calculus 1, but at least we have some familiarity with the graphs of sine, cosine, and tangent. Before we wrap this up, we're going to look at some key facts about these things. Sine squared x is the same as saying sine x squared. Okay, sine x times sine x is denoted as sine squared x. So we're going to deal with that a lot. Okay, same thing with cosine, same thing with tangent, same thing as the rest of them. There are going to be many times where I'm going to be given sine squared x, and I'm going to have to remember, oh, sine squared x means something squared. and that something is sine. Okay, that'll probably be more likely to happen at the end of calculus, but there it is. Last but not least, this is a Pythagorean identity, a trig identity. Sine squared plus cos squared is 1. And that will rear its ugly head in one way or another during calculus, where I might give you something like 1 minus cos squared x, and we're going to remember that, wait a minute, 1 minus cos squared x, well, if I subtracted cosine squared from both sides of this guy, that would give me sine squared x. So some of these trig identities will pop up from time to time in calculus. If you didn't take pre-calculus, make sure you understand these facts before we really get heavy duty into calculus, because these guys will show up quite a bit in Calc 1. All right, so watch this one along with if I'm telling you to watch it, you already watched it. Make sure you watch the other one, which is about factoring, and these 2 videos should help adequately prepare you for Calculus 1. Alrighty. Bye!